What would you do if your car broke down on a lonely stretch of highway and a stranger with a toolbox walked up to your window? Let us know in the comments what you'd do. For Lauren Mitchell, the moment the man offered to step closer, her heart froze. Was this a good Samaritan or something else? She had to choose between trusting her instincts or taking a chance on the kindness of a stranger. What happened next changed the way she thought about roadside help forever. But not every story begins with a breakdown. Sometimes, even the most ordinary drive home can turn into something you never expected. Jessica Turner left the hospital parking lot without a second thought, the night pressing in around her. After a long shift, she just wanted to get home. Her route was familiar, 30 minutes along I-285, the loop that wraps around Atlanta. She tuned the FM radio to static, more out of habit than interest, and let the hum of the engine fill the silence. Rain started as she passed the airport exit, soft at first. She didn't rush to turn on the wipers, her mind still replaying the faces and voices from her shift. But then the sky opened up, and the rain hit hard. The windshield blurred under the downpour, red taillights and white lane markers smearing together. She clicked the wipers to their highest setting, but they barely kept up. The world outside dissolved into streaks and reflections. I-285 is known for its accidents and aggressive drivers, but at this hour it felt deserted. The concrete barriers glistened, black and slick. Jessica tightened her grip on the wheel and slowed down, watching for standing water in the ruts along the edges. There was nowhere to pull off and no exits nearby. She kept going, her focus narrowing to the road ahead. A strange shape appeared through the rain. Something about the way the headlights bounced off the surface made her uneasy. She eased off the gas and squinted into the storm, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. Then the pavement simply vanished. The road ended in a black gap, a 20-foot drop where the asphalt had been washed away by a burst water main. No cones, no warning signs, just a jagged edge and darkness beyond. Jessica slammed on the brakes. The car skidded, fishtailing across the slick surface. She fought the wheel, heart pounding, as the car slid toward the edge. The tires stopped just short of the drop. For a moment, the only sound was the rain hammering the roof and the engine idling unevenly. Her breath fogged the glass. She stared at the empty space ahead, trying to process the fact that she had almost driven straight into it. She checked the rearview mirror. No headlights, no other cars. The highway behind her was empty. She tried her phone, no signal. The radio gave nothing but static. The sense of isolation pressed in, heavy and absolute. She was alone, with a crumbling road in front of her and a storm all around. A pickup truck appeared out of the rain, its headlights harsh in the darkness. It stopped a short distance behind her. Jessica's hands tightened on the wheel. The truck idled for a long moment before the driver stepped out. He looked rough, mid-40s, unshaven, eyes bloodshot. He moved slowly toward her window, rain dripping from the brim of his cap. Jessica's relief faded as he came closer. Her stomach twisted. He raised a hand, motioning for her to roll down the window. She hesitated, every instinct telling her to keep the glass up. The gap in the road behind her left her with nowhere to go. Reversing in the rain seemed as risky as staying put. Before she could decide, another set of lights swept through the storm. A semi-truck slowed and stopped beside the pickup. The cab door opened, and a woman in a neon vest jumped down, shielding her face from the rain. She jogged over and knocked on Jessica's window. Jessica lowered the window just enough to hear. The woman's voice cut through the storm. "You okay? That drop's right behind you. Let's get you out of here." She gestured toward the truck, her tone steady and direct. Jessica nodded and, under the woman's guidance, backed her car away from the edge, inch by inch, until she was safely beside the semi. She got out and climbed into the truck cab. The woman, Karen, as Jessica learned, handed her a dry blanket and poured coffee from a thermos. Karen picked up her phone and called the highway patrol, then used her CB to alert other drivers. Jessica's hands shook as she tried to hold the cup. She kept glancing out at the pickup, but the man was gone, fading back into the storm. They waited together in the cab. Karen talked calmly about the road, the weather, the way things can turn in an instant. Jessica listened, grateful for the presence of someone steady. Within half an hour, patrol cars arrived, and a tow truck pulled her car to safety. When it was over, Jessica and Karen shared a quick hug. Karen's words stuck with her. Sometimes you've just got to be there for the next person. Jessica thanked her again, then watched as the semi pulled away into the rain. Back home, the memory stayed with her. Months later, she still found herself tense whenever rain started to fall or when she passed a dark stretch of highway. The real danger, she realized, wasn't just the missing asphalt. It was the uncertainty, the isolation, and the split-second decisions you have to make when help is far away and trust feels risky. She kept thinking about the stranger in the pickup, the way fear and hope can blur together when you're vulnerable. The experience changed how she saw the road and how she weighed her instincts against the unknown. Sometimes, it's not the weather or the road itself that leaves a mark. It's the reminder that you're never as safe as you think, and that help can come from unexpected places. Stories like Jessica's make you wonder how you'd react when everything familiar suddenly turns threatening. Sometimes, the most ordinary stop or turn can lead you somewhere you never wanted to be. Mark Sullivan still avoids rest areas whenever he can. Even now, he remembers that night on US 287 outside Wichita Falls. The drive was supposed to be routine, just a long stretch home after a day spent fixing electrical panels up in Amarillo. He'd been behind the wheel for hours, the Texas plains rolling past, nothing but dark fields and the faint orange glow of distant farm lights. When the rest area sign appeared, he felt more relief than he wanted to admit. He checked his phone. One bar of service flickered on the screen, barely enough to load a map. He figured he'd stop for a few minutes, splash some water on his face, maybe grab a soda, and then get back on the road. The rest area was empty. The parking lot lights buzzed overhead, casting a weak, uneven light. Mark counted 3 other cars, but none showed any sign of life. He noticed right away how alone he felt, the silence broken only by the crunch of gravel under his boots. He went into the bathroom, the door groaning on its hinges, and washed up quickly. The fluorescent light inside kept flickering, making the shadows jump. He tried not to think about how far he was from anything familiar. When he stepped back outside, he noticed a man standing near one of the picnic tables at the edge of the lot. Mark couldn't place him, and there was no car nearby that could have belonged to the guy. He felt a chill, the kind that makes your skin tighten up even if you tell yourself not to worry. The man leaned against the table, arms crossed, watching Mark without looking away. Mark tried to ignore it. Maybe he was just stretching his legs. Maybe he was waiting for a ride. But something about the way he stared made Mark's nerves jump. He picked up his pace, heading for his truck, and kept his eyes forward. He got in, locked the doors, and started the engine. The headlights swept across the lot, catching the man's face for a second before he disappeared back into the shadows. Mark didn't waste time. He backed out, checked his mirrors, and pulled out onto the highway, telling himself it was nothing. But as he merged back onto US 287, he saw headlights flicker on in the rest area behind him. A black sedan pulled out, falling in line 100 yards back. At first, Mark tried to convince himself it was just another traveler. The highway was public after all, but the car stayed behind him, never gaining or falling back. He sped up, so did the sedan. He slowed down and it matched his speed. He switched lanes, hoping the car would pass, but it stayed right in his blind spot. Mark's mind started racing. He knew this wasn't normal. The pattern felt deliberate, like the driver was waiting to see what he would do next. He gripped the wheel tighter, sweat starting to build on his palms. The fields on either side of the road looked endless, broken only by the occasional barbed wire fence or a clump of trees. Every farmhouse light in the distance seemed too far away to help. Mark didn't like how exposed he felt, how little control he had over what was happening behind him. He thought about calling for help, but his phone still showed only one bar, and the signal kept dropping in and out. He tried to stay calm, focusing on the rhythm of the road, but the car's headlights never left his mirrors. He took an exit without signaling, hoping to throw the driver off. The sedan followed, matching every move. Mark felt his chest tighten. He took a left onto a narrow access road, then another turn, but the headlights stayed with him, unwavering. He could feel the pressure building, the sense of being hunted getting sharper with every mile. Finally, Mark spotted a gravel road half hidden by trees. He turned in quickly, killed his lights, and rolled to a stop behind a thick stand of oaks. He sat there, heart pounding, listening for the sound of tires on gravel. The sedan never appeared. After a few minutes, Mark let out a shaky breath, relief mixing with doubt. He wondered if he'd overreacted, but deep down, he knew trusting his gut had been the right call. He waited a long time before pulling back onto the main road. For the rest of the drive, every set of headlights in his rear view made him tense up. He couldn't shake the feeling that something worse might have happened if he hadn't acted when he did. Later, he'd tell friends the whole thing felt planned, not random. The man at the rest area, the car with no clear owner, the way it all unfolded, Mark never got answers, just the memory of a night when instinct might have been the only thing keeping him safe. The experience changed him. Now, every time he passes a rest area or sees a car lingering a little too long behind him, he pays closer attention. He keeps his phone charged, his eyes moving from the road to the mirrors and back. The open highway doesn't feel the same. He's more cautious, more aware of how quickly things can shift from routine to dangerous. Some situations force you to rely on nothing but your own judgment. Mark's story is a reminder that sometimes the best you can do is listen to that uneasy feeling and act before it's too late. But not every roadside encounter is so clear-cut. Sometimes the real challenge is deciding whether to trust a stranger at all. Lauren Mitchell thought the drive would be simple. She left Topeka later than planned, the sky already dark, and pointed her sedan west toward Salina. The highway out here felt endless, nothing but a thin line cutting through open fields. She kept the radio low, humming along, trying to ignore how empty everything felt. The cold pressed in through the glass, and she pulled her jacket tighter, focusing on the steady sound of the engine. That steady sound didn't last. The first hiccup was small, just a faint shudder, easy to dismiss. Then it happened again, harder this time. The hum turned into a sputter. Lauren's hands tightened on the wheel. She glanced at the dash, hoping the warning lights would stay off, but they didn't. The engine coughed, then died altogether. Her car rolled to a stop on the gravel shoulder, the headlights casting a dull glow across empty fields. The only sound left was the ticking of the engine cooling down. She sat there for a moment, staring out at the darkness. The highway stretched away in both directions, no other cars in sight. Her phone sat on the passenger seat, its battery low enough to make her nervous. She tried the ignition again. The engine made a weak grinding sound, then nothing. Lauren exhaled, trying to steady her breathing. She pulled her jacket tighter and stepped out, the wind cutting through the thin fabric. The silence felt heavy, broken only by the crunch of gravel under her boots as she walked to the front of the car. She popped the hood and stared at the mess of wires and metal. She didn't know what she was looking for. Her mind raced through every warning she'd ever heard. Don't trust strangers. Stay in your car. Call for help if you can. But her phone was nearly dead, and she couldn't see a single light on the horizon. Headlights appeared in the distance. At first, they were just a faint glow, but they grew brighter, drawing closer with a steady rumble. Lauren's first reaction was relief. Someone was coming. But as the truck slowed and pulled onto the shoulder behind her, unease crept in. She stepped back from the engine, wiping her hands on her jeans. The driver's door opened. A man got out. He was average height, maybe late 40s, wearing a plaid jacket and boots. His cap shaded his face, but he moved with a kind of steady calm. He didn't shout or wave, just pulled a red toolbox from the back of his truck and walked over. Every instinct Lauren had told her to be careful, to keep her distance. She forced a small smile and tried to sound casual. My car died. I'm not sure what happened. He nodded, his voice even. Want me to take a look? Might be something simple. Lauren hesitated. She watched him shift the toolbox under his arm, his movements unhurried. There was no sign of impatience, no rush. Still, her heart beat faster. She remembered every story about roadside dangers, but with her phone nearly dead and the highway empty, she didn't have many options. She stepped aside, arms crossed tight, and let him approach the car. He opened the hood and leaned in, working quietly. His breath hung in the cold air. Lauren kept her eyes on him, standing just out of reach. She listened as he muttered to himself about wires and connections. The wind picked up, sending a chill down her back. She shifted her weight, glancing down the road every so often, hoping for another set of headlights. After a few minutes, he straightened up. Looks like your battery connections are loose. That's probably all it is. I can tighten them up for you. Lauren nodded, not sure if she felt relieved or just more nervous. Okay. Thanks. He worked in silence, hands steady and practiced. Lauren stayed where she was, watching every move. She didn't say much, just waited, her mind running through worst-case scenarios. It was hard to tell if she was more afraid of what could go wrong or embarrassed by how suspicious she felt. When he finished, he closed the hood and wiped his hands on a rag. Try it now, he said, nodding toward the driver's seat. Lauren got in and turned the key. The engine started on the first try, the sound louder than she remembered. She let out a shaky breath, relief washing over her. For a second, she felt guilty for doubting him. Then came gratitude. Without him, she'd still be stranded in the dark. She stepped out, unsure how to thank him. I really appreciate it, she said, her voice quieter now. I would have been stuck out here all night. He shrugged, already packing up his toolbox. You don't want to be out here after dark. Gets cold fast. I've seen a lot of folks break down on this stretch. He didn't ask for money or linger. He just nodded and walked back to his truck. Lauren watched the taillights fade into the distance, her hands still shaking. She realized she'd been holding her jacket so tight her knuckles hurt. Back on the road, she kept thinking about what happened. She felt grateful, but also unsettled by how quickly fear had taken over. The man hadn't done anything to scare her. He'd just helped, then left. But every instinct had screamed at her to be careful, to expect the worst. She wondered if she would have turned him away if she'd had even a little more battery on her phone, or if another car had come by. The next morning, she stopped at a garage to have the battery checked. The tow operator listened to her story and nodded. "That's probably Bill," he said. "He's helped dozens of people out here. Good man." Lauren didn't know what to say to that. The night had left her shaken, but it also left her with something else, a reminder that fear can take over even when help is genuine. She kept thinking about how quickly she'd judged a stranger, how close she'd come to refusing the help she needed most. It's easy to think you know how you'll react when you're alone on a dark road. Sometimes, though, the real test is how you handle the unknown. Lauren's story didn't end with danger, but it left her with a new kind of caution, a sense that not every threat is real and not every stranger is out to harm you. But some nights, even a simple drive can turn into something you can't explain. Sometimes what follows you down the highway isn't a person at all, but a feeling that refuses to let go. Daniel Reed barely registered the time as he packed up his camera gear and loaded it into the trunk of his car. After hours spent photographing a small town on the outskirts of Springfield, Missouri, he just wanted to get home. It had been a productive day, but a long one, and his focus narrowed to the drive ahead. By the time he pulled onto Interstate 44, the sky was already a slate-gray curtain, the last of the daylight swallowed by dense fog rolling across the highway. The fog had crept in slowly earlier that evening, turning the world hazy. Now it hung thick and unmoving, dissolving the edges of everything his headlights tried to touch. The road ahead seemed to vanish with every turn, the beams reflecting back faintly through the mist. The highway was quieter than usual, almost unnervingly so, and Daniel couldn't shake the sense of disconnection the fog created. It felt like driving through a dream, strangely detached and drawn out, as if the rest of the world had slipped away. He hadn't seen another car for miles. It was just him, the faint rumble of his tires on the damp road, and the rhythm of his thoughts to keep him company. That solitude broke when, out of nowhere, a pair of headlights cut through the fog behind him. They glared starkly in his rearview mirror, a sudden presence that snapped him out of his daze. He checked his speed, reassured by the steadiness of the cruise control, and eased into the right lane to let the car pass. Except it didn't pass. The car slid into the space behind him, close enough that its beams flooded the interior of his vehicle. Daniel squinted, adjusting the rearview mirror to cut the harsh glare, but the lights just seemed to linger. Too close. Close enough that he couldn't dismiss it as a careless driver. He eased the car forward a bit, then slowed down slightly, hoping to give the other driver a chance to go around, but the headlights stayed locked onto him, keeping the same uncomfortably close distance. At first, Daniel tried to convince himself it was nothing. Maybe the person behind him was nervous about the fog, or just didn't realize how close they were. He tried not to overthink it, but another mile ticked by, and the lights stayed exactly where they were, unwavering. The pressure in his chest grew, a faint alarm ringing at the edge of his nerves. He knew the stretch of road well enough to run through his options in his head. There wasn't much shoulder to work with, and the next exit wasn't for several miles. He didn't let himself panic, but he adjusted his grip on the steering wheel, his knuckles tight against the leather. The car behind him edged closer. Its headlights filled every corner of his mirrors now, swallowing up the darkness around him. Daniel's mouth went dry. He tried speeding up and slowing down in quick succession, but the car matched his pace each time, never falling back or surging ahead. His heart quickened as the thoughts he'd tried to ignore pushed their way to the front. This wasn't random. Whoever was behind him wasn't just inattentive, they were doing this deliberately. Alone on the highway, with visibility shrinking by the minute, Daniel felt the weight of the situation settle like a stone in his stomach. His breathing slowed as he tried to think through his options, forcing himself to stay calm. The fog made carelessness dangerous. He couldn't afford to make the wrong move. He changed lanes, smoothly at first, but the car mirrored his every move. Left, right, signaling, feigning an exit. It didn't matter. The lights never fell away. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, and the car's headlights drilled into his mind like two unblinking eyes. He tried to guess what the other driver wanted, but that made it worse. The not knowing, the sense that he was being singled out, left him with a kind of dread he hadn't felt before. He wasn't just being followed, he was being targeted. If this escalated, it could go anywhere, and that unknown, that unspoken threat in the air, was more suffocating than the fog pressing against the glass. A faint green highway sign appeared up ahead. Daniel made his decision. The exit was close, and his best chance at shaking the tail was to head somewhere with people and lights. He couldn't see exactly how far away the truck stop was, but the faint halo cutting through the fog was enough. He flicked on his turn signal, not because he needed it, but to see if the tailgater would react. The car behind him didn't slow, didn't swerve, didn't signal. It just stayed fixed in place. Daniel pulled off anyway, determined to see this through. The truck stop came into sight moments later, its lights cutting through the haze with a dull, comforting glow. He passed rows of parked semi-trucks and pulled into a spot near the front. He left the engine running, hands still on the wheel, every muscle tense. For a moment, he froze, eyes darting to the mirrors. Relief only came when he realized the car hadn't followed him off the highway. It had disappeared into the night, vanishing as abruptly as it had arrived. The adrenaline in his system left him rattled. He sat there with the engine humming, hands trembling, replaying the whole encounter in his head. The relentless headlights, the feeling of being boxed in, the sense that someone was watching his every move. It all pressed down on him, even now that he was parked in the safety of the truck stop lights. He wondered if it was just a stranger messing around, or if it could have turned into something worse. He would never know. "That night stuck with me in a way I can't explain," Daniel would later say. He talked about it like someone describing a vivid nightmare, details shifting every time he tried to recount it. He hadn't been harmed, not physically, but the psychological impact was real. It makes you realize how quickly control can be taken from you. Just the idea that someone can get into your head, make you feel hunted, even if they never say a word, it changes the way you drive. After that night, Daniel developed new habits. He started checking his mirrors more often, sometimes every few seconds, especially when another car lingered behind him longer than felt right. He paid more attention to exits, to well-lit areas, to where he could go if something felt off. The memory of that foggy highway followed him, a quiet reminder that the road isn't always neutral, and neither are the people on it. Even after pulling away from the truck stop and heading home, the feeling didn't fade. The fog still pressed against the glass, and every shadow seemed to hold the possibility of another set of headlights. Sometimes, nothing actually happens, but the fear of what could have happened is enough to leave a mark. Driving alone at night, you never really know what's waiting around the next curve. And sometimes, the most ordinary stretch of highway can become the setting for a story you'll never forget. Megan Carter never thought much about danger on the road. As a social worker, she spent years driving between appointments, her car more of a second office than a source of worry. On a humid June night, she finished up with a client and headed out onto Interstate 80, the highway stretching ahead in a long, dark ribbon. The rain had started up again, light at first, just enough to blur the edges of the world outside and fill the car with the steady hush of water on glass. She settled into the rhythm of the drive, the dashboard's glow and the faint red dots of a distant semi giving her a sense of quiet routine. She passed DeSoto, then Van Meter, the road mostly empty, except for the occasional truck. Her mind wandered back to her last appointment, replaying the conversation and making a mental note to follow up in the morning. She wasn't tired, just lulled by the sameness of the drive and the sound of the rain. It felt safe, boring even. The change came fast. At first it was just a smudge of light in the distance. She thought it was a car ahead, maybe a mile or two up, the headlights reflecting off the wet road. But the angle was wrong. The lights grew sharper, brighter, and then her brain caught up with what her eyes were seeing. Those weren't taillights. They were headlights, and they were coming toward her, fast. For a second, Megan froze. Her mind tried to make sense of it, running through explanations that didn't fit. Was the car stopped? Was it an illusion? But the truth was clear even before her body reacted. A car was speeding the wrong way down her lane. She didn't have time to think. Instinct took over. Her hands tightened on the wheel and she slammed her foot on the brake, the tires shrieking on the wet pavement. She jerked the wheel to the right, barely keeping control as the car fishtailed toward the shoulder. The other vehicle flashed past in a blur of metal and rain. Megan felt her heart hammering, her breath catching in her throat as the wheels gripped the gravel just shy of the ditch. The wrong-way driver never slowed. No brake lights, no swerve, just a blank face behind the windshield as the car tore by and vanished into the night. Megan sat there, hands locked on the wheel, the world narrowing to the sound of her own pulse and the rain pounding harder than before. She let out a shaky breath, realizing how close she'd come to disaster. She pulled onto the shoulder, shifting into park with fingers that wouldn't stop trembling. The image of that oncoming car, those headlights, that empty look on the driver's face, replayed in her mind. It felt unreal, like watching a scene from outside her own body. Her phone buzzed against the console. She grabbed it, wiping her palms on her jeans, and dialed 911. When the operator answered, Megan's voice came out thin and shaky. She tried to explain, giving her location and the details as best she could, the calm on the other end of the line making her own fear feel even sharper. The operator promised to send help and told her to stay put. Megan watched the rain slide down the windshield, her breath fogging the glass. She waited for the deputies, headlights eventually appearing in the distance, their cruisers moving slowly through the storm. When they arrived, she stepped out and tried to answer their questions, but the details all blurred together. She kept seeing those headlights, kept hearing the screech of her own brakes. The deputies said they'd look for the wrong-way driver, but Megan could tell from their voices that it wasn't likely they'd find them right away. In the days that followed, Megan couldn't get back behind the wheel without feeling every muscle tense. She scanned the road, checked her mirrors, and watched every oncoming car as if it might suddenly veer into her lane. Nightmares woke her up, headlights burning through the dark. She started to dread the drives that used to feel routine. Even short trips made her uneasy. She talked to friends about what happened, but it always came back to the same moment, the flash of headlights and the split-second decision that saved her. According to the National Transportation Safety Board, wrong-way crashes kill hundreds every year. Most happen at night, and alcohol is often a factor. Megan kept thinking about that, about how someone else's mistake, someone she'd never meet, had nearly changed everything for her. She found herself reading about wrong-way crashes, about the signs and road designs meant to prevent them. But none of that changed what she felt every time she got in the car. She learned to drive differently. She left more space between herself and other cars. She watched the horizon for anything out of place. She trusted her instincts, ready to react if something felt wrong. If she ever saw headlights coming at her again, she knew to slow down, move to the right, and try to get the other driver's attention. It was a simple plan, but it was all she had. Megan's experience didn't just make her more careful, it changed her idea of what it meant to be safe. She realized how quickly things could go wrong, how little control she really had. She started talking to others about what happened, hoping her story might make someone else think twice or react a second faster if they ever faced the same danger. The trauma lingered, sometimes showing up as anxiety or restless nights, but she worked through it, sometimes with help from a counselor, sometimes just by talking it out. She kept driving. She didn't want fear to win, but she never forgot that night, or how close she'd come to losing everything. Every time she saw a set of headlights on an empty stretch of road, she felt a flicker of that old fear, but she kept going. She trusted her instincts and stayed alert, knowing that sometimes the unexpected is the only warning you'll get. Stories like Megan's show that even the most ordinary drive can turn dangerous in an instant. According to experts, the best protection is to stay vigilant, trust your gut, and always expect the unexpected. That's what Megan does now. She still checks her mirrors, scans the road ahead, and never lets her guard down for long. It's not about driving scared, it's about knowing how quickly things can change and being ready for it. And sometimes, the difference between disaster and survival comes down to a single moment, a single choice. That's something Megan carries with her every time she turns the key and pulls onto the road. Every story here reminds us that the road's real danger often comes from the unexpected, the moments that test your instincts and leave you changed, and taught us to trust our gut on every dark stretch. Jessica Turner still remembers the panic of that rain-soaked highway, just as Daniel Reed can't forget the headlights burning through the fog. These experiences linger, changing the way you drive and how you think about your own safety. Have you faced a moment like this? Which story shook you most? Let us know in the comments. Hit like if you found these stories unsettling, and subscribe to join our community of late-night road warriors. Stay alert out there.